Hey guys, my name is James, and in this video I'm going to give you a quick tip. If you smell some filament burning, there's a possibility that your hot end or nozzle was knocked loose and the filament is being overcooked or oozing out of the threads and is staying on the hot end too long, and you will get that smell of the filament burning. So check your hot end. Also, if you have some under extrusion, it may be that your nozzle is loose and the filament is coming out of the threads. Each heating element is going to be slightly different. The tip that I have for you is that if it's a new hot end, you may be able to get away with threading your nozzle and hot end or heating block while the filament is cold. But if you have been already using the hot end and there is some filament inside the threads, some filament inside the nozzle, you have to get that hot end to temperature, because if you don't and it's cold, there is a possibility that the filament will be in between the threads, and when you tighten that thread or torque the thread, it will not be enough to close the gap between the threads. So make sure that you tighten all the threads while the heating block is still hot. And make sure you don't burn yourself. If you have a glove that is heat resistant, go ahead and use those. Just be careful, because you will be making the repairs while the heating element is still hot. On a stock CR10S Pro heating element like this, you have to hold on to the heating block and thread the nozzle and the heating element at the same time, kind of as a counter torque. For the Microswiss Hotend that I'm going to show you is going to be slightly different. There is a nut which is part of the actual heat break that you need to attach it to the heating block first. Otherwise, when you thread in the nozzle, it's not going to complete that gap. So make sure you thread in that nut, which is part of the heat break. And then make sure there are no gaps between the threads, or the gaps between the heat break and the nozzle, etc. Sometimes it's happened like I did, because I left the model on the bed and then, not remembering that the model was still on the bed, I moved the heating element and then it hit the heating block, which loosened the threads. So sometimes this does happen by accident. So just check. Sometimes it may be that you may have not torqued the threads according to specs and it is loose. So again, if you do smell that filament burning, this may be the cause. So just check your heating element. There is oozing. It's getting too hot and the filament is actually burning. This is the regular color of the filament, but right there on top you can tell that it is the color brown and it has been burnt. I've actually noticed that this is leaking up top, and I'm just going to pull the filament out. And I remember this, the heating block getting hit previously, and as you can see, it's pretty much loose. It turns. This is going to be extremely hot. If you can, you want to use a glove that dissipates the heat. Don't burn your fingers. The print was finished. I forgot to remove it when I moved the hot end. The model hit the heating block and loosened, which in turn made the filament ooze out of the top threads. If you take a look up here, this is where the filament is coming out of the hot end. This top junction where the threads are. Right now the heating block and the nozzle is loose. I'm removing the nozzle. Clean up the hot end while the heating block is still hot. This way the filament will be molten and will allow you to remove the excess plastic. You can use tissue paper and some Q-tips to clean up the excess plastic. Just be careful with the wires, especially the thermistor wire. It is super thin and there is a possibility that you may break it. Using the Q-tip to clean the excess plastic. Loosen the grub screw. You can insert the nozzle, but do not fully tighten. I am using a tissue paper just because the socket was a little bit bigger than the actual nozzle. Once it's cleaned, you need to thread in the heat break to the heating block. You need to do this while the block is still hot, or otherwise the cold filament will create a gap in the threads. Hold the heating block in place with a pair of pliers and use a wrench to tighten the heat break to the heating block. Then thread in your nozzle, all while the heating block is at temperature. If you look in the bottom of the heat break, you'll notice that the nozzle is not perfectly centered. It's actually in an offset, so if you do not align it correctly and you're using something like a BL Touch, there will be a slight offset difference. So make sure the wires and the nozzle are in correct alignment from the previous setup. Push the heating block up flush with the cold element. Tighten the grub screw. This is a final check to make sure that the nozzle is torqued and not loose. Once complete, extrude some filament to check if there are any leaks. If there are any leaks, take apart and repeat the steps. If there are no leaks, you can start the assembly process. Start by adding the silicone sock. Assemble the fan enclosure by adding the 2 screws on top. So guys, my name is James, and if you found this video helpful, go ahead and leave a like, share in the comments. If there's any questions, leave it in the comments below. Subscribe to this channel. Till next time, I'll see you then.